Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Mohammad and I'm from the Office of Advancement at LUMS. Welcome to our podcast today, in which we will be discussing a new program at LUMS, which is the Bachelor's in Arts in Comparative Literature and Creative Arts. I'm joined today with Dr. Maryam Wasif Khan, who is an Associate Professor at the Mushtaq Gurmani School of Humanities and Social Sciences. And we're also joined with Assistant Professor Mr. Tabish Habib. Assalamu alaikum everyone.
Assalamu alaikum, how are you?
I'm doing well. Well, everyone, let's get started with the first section of our podcast, which is about the program. So, Dr. Maryam, I'm going to be directing this question towards you. So, basically, what was the motivation behind starting this program?
Okay, so we started the program back in 2019. I myself was very passionate about the idea of comparative literature in Pakistan. I had studied comparative literature as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. And when I came back to Pakistan, the only way of studying literature was either English literature or Urdu literature. There was no way to think about these two as connected and historically connected bodies of work. We ignored other literary forms in Pashto or in Punjabi, of course, which are all very rich traditions, and Sindhi as well as Farsi, of course, which is such an essential part of our past. So my entire idea was to put together something that allows us to think dynamically and in new ways, and most importantly in ways that we find ourselves, as opposed to using, Western forms of theory or Western forms of thinking about literature. I wanted us to be able to develop something new around literary studies. It so happened that comparative literature has always been a small field, but it so happened I was joined by creative colleagues at the time, Dr. Nisa Hamid, Bilal Tanbir, Tabish Habib, and Fatma Fayaz, who's a Persian specialist. And we all really thought about how we need to make this into something much bigger than just the text. So the artistic colleagues, and I think my friend Tabish here will talk a little more about that, put together a program that really guides storytelling. And Fatma and myself put together a program which thinks about and gives students a base in textual studies, but also allows them. So before you do anything creative, you must, of course, know what great writing, great filmmaking, great storytelling has been historically, what are the traditions that we ourselves come from. So that was the idea behind the program, and I think that's something we've put together now.
Well, Mr. Tabish, the field has now expanded for comparative literature and creative arts. Can you tell me how these two different aspects have blended together? And can you also talk about the filmmaking aspect in this program?
Sure. I think it all starts from the word story, right? Storytelling is one of our oldest human practices. And I think whether you take filmmaking or you take literature, and to build off what Dr. Maryam was saying, I think it's important to give the students a solid base to kind of creatively express who they are, what they want to say, where they come from. And I think with this program, so I'll tell you a little bit about how I got involved. Dr. Nisa Hamid invited me for the Picture Ghar series. And over there, I came about twice. This is before I started working at LUMS. And I was really blown away by the sense of community with regards to filmmaking at LUMS. And on top of that, before I got involved, there was a lot of alums that were getting a lot of success with the films that they were making. So there's Saim Sadiq, who I had worked with, and then Rasti Farooq. So when Professor Nisa Hamid got in touch with me and said, we'd like you to come on board and teach here, I saw it as a really, really good opportunity to kind of build community. And since then, it's been about over 2.5 years for me at LUMS, and I've been really blown away by the kind of films that I've seen and how students have kind of expanded their work over time. So I think that's how I got involved, and that's what I've been really pleasantly surprised to see, and I hope to see more of that in the future.
And are there any unique themes or aspects about this program that differentiate them from the other universities or other institutions that teach similar programs?
I think the fact that we prioritize the importance of storytelling. If you watch films, or anybody that watches films, right, it all comes from the script, right? If the story doesn't move people or doesn't connect with people, then it's really not going to circulate, right? It doesn't matter how fancy your cameras are,
or how good the actors are.
How good the actors are, or how big the sets are, right? It all comes from story. And I think a lot of credit goes to my colleague, Dr. Maryam, and all of the professors here, because even before I came here, all the students had a really, really strong sense of story. And I think we just try to build off that.
And Dr. Maryam, would you have any input on this as well?
Yeah, I think that the fact that we train our students in how to work with and through a text before they start telling stories. So we're not like, oh, okay, you're already a filmmaker just because you know how to use a camera. What we're really kind of saying is, first, learn how to read. First, explore languages that are around you. Use those stories to learn empathy. Use those stories to think through the world in a fashion that you may not have been acquainted with, because many of us have grown up in a world that's primarily Hollywood films, a few Bollywood films, but there's no Pakistani story. Or there's no story of what does it mean to be a middle-class kid growing up in, a small house. Or there's no stories about that. There's no novels about that. But, one of the things we do is that we ask students to think about situations that are familiar to them. So, in our introductory course, students will read an Ismat Chugtai story. They'll also read the great Urdu novel Umrao Janada, but at the same time, they'll also be making short films under the guidance of somebody, who's trained to help them transform literary themes into very short films and, do something creative with that. So we're constantly asking students to do text and arts together. And I think that allows us to really produce a student who is multi-talented and has a very holistic understanding of the world they're coming from.
Are there any student societies and LUMS that help support this department as well?
I think films.
There's the Media Society at LUMS, and they've been making films. So Saim Sadiq, we mentioned earlier, he got into Columbia with the film that he made with the Media Society at LUMS, right? This is before any courses were even being offered. So, like I said earlier, there was already a community that was here. It's just about facilitating them, exposing them to different screen texts. So, as Dr. Maryam said, right, a lot of students come in with Hollywood influences or Bollywood influences, but there's a growing independent film scene within Pakistan, right, that doesn't really make it to commercial screens. And there's a lot of these filmmakers that have been working very hard for the last 5 years, and the scene is growing. It's getting a lot of attention from festivals abroad. And for me, a lot of the interesting conversations that I have with students is when I expose them to these texts. And then after class, what they usually come and talk to me about is that we didn't even know that films like this existed. And that's what inspires them. When they see filmmakers that they kind of see themselves in go abroad and get success, or even locally get success, that's what makes them want to make more films.
So this does bring us to the next section of our podcast, which is called Interdisciplinary Exploration. So Dr. Maryam, I would like to ask you, how does this program actually help the students explore the differences between literature and creative arts and other aspects of this program as well?
So I think that, different people have different styles of teaching, have different approaches to art. So I myself work very historically. I also encourage my students to take a lot of history courses because for me, literature is essentially a historical formation and has to be understood in that way. At the same time, my colleague Fatma Fayaz, who's a Persian specialist, she's also a poet and translator. For her, aesthetics are very important. So she, really teaches students how to appreciate the verse, but also the history of the verse in our part of the world. And I think that, students also come with some anthropology courses, they'll come with some psychology courses, some of them come with economics, and we really want them to pull these things together and to use all of their talents. And so, so I think, of course, we have a big bunch of students who are really interested in the screen, who are interested in media production or film. But we also have students who are interested in literary studies, who want to kind of pursue literature as a career, who want to teach, who want to write, or who just want to be writers. So I think that that's where we have a place for everybody. And I think recently, this is one of the things I think neither of us has actually mentioned yet, that now we're also teaching students illustration skills, graphic novel production. So we're going into a whole other medium that I think is really important for this new generation and the new readers who are, I think now in their teens and 20s, I think, yeah.
How does this program help the critical thinking abilities of our students, and how does it improve their creative arts abilities as well?
So I would say that one of the things we focus most on is reading. And when I say reading, I mean really looking closely at a text and offering interpretation as an individual. At the early stages in particular, I never ask students to go Google stuff. I ask them to just sit alone with like a text and just kind of think about what it means to them, what kinds of meanings they're able to derive from it. And I think that that really produces an independent thinker. Not just a thinker, but somebody who's able to really kind of say, okay, here is the reason why I think like that. So it's not like, it's not what we call Hawaii fire, right? I mean, that's something we're trying students not, we're trying that students don't do that. So we really want them to use textual evidence. And in many ways, I always tell students, imagine yourself as a lawyer. So a lot of law students do very well with us. Likewise, I would say our students could be law students, though I always tell people, don't do it, come to us. And yeah, so that's what I would say, yeah.
Okay, so is there any particular piece of literature that comes in your mind that a student has written?
Well, students don't write literature, okay? Students don't write, students write papers at this stage, and they write, so they'll write short papers that are critical pieces or interpretive pieces on works of literature that they have read in our courses. But they do, so I think a lot of students are now writing nonfiction pieces. They write short stories that they then turn into scripts. Yeah, so I think Tabish has supervised one such project, like Abe's, I think, is a great example. Yeah,
so last semester we had our first student whose senior project was a short film. And I, along with Professor Bilal Tanveer and Dr. Zaybunissa Hamid, we kind of mentored the student along with his script. So he spent about a whole semester compiling the script, doing research, trying to understand what's the best way to kind of go about the story and then film it. And he ended up making a really, really strong short film. And he's pursuing filmmaking as a career at this point in time. He assisted me on my short film, which I shot over the summer. Actually, 5 of our students, who I think are all part of the CLCA program, assisted on that film and really enjoyed the experience. And yeah, at this current point in time, they are considering pursuing filmmaking as a career.
So if you would like to be a part of this experience, let me just tell you the admission process that we have at LUMS. First of all, you will need to create an application on our website. Once you have created an application, you will be required to submit some documents as well, and some details as well about yourself. Let's start off with the academic criteria. For the academic criteria, you will need to have an average of 8 Bs for your O-levels and an average of 2 Bs and a C for your A-levels. When we talk about metric and FSC, you need to have 70% in your metric, 70% in your FSC. For FA students, it is 65%. And if you're doing your IB, 28 out of 45 is the requirement for your first year. When we talk about the admission test, you have an option of giving either the LCAT exam, the SAT exam, or the ACT exam. And then your commencement of classes will start if you are admitted into LUMS. So this brings us to our next section, which is called faculty and mentorship. Mr. Tabish, can you tell us about how the expertise of our faculty helps our student know more about these programs, gain more experience about these programs, and how does it help them later on in their lives?
So one of the ways in which I kind of like to formulate my courses is that I like to mirror the actual industry, right? So in my courses, there's a final project that the students kind of take up, which is a final film, short filmed artifact, and different students take on different creative roles in those projects, right? So it's a collaborative medium. So a student can be director, a student can be a screenwriter, cinematographer. So depending on what the creative strengths of of different students are, they kind of collaborate together to make a film, right? Similarly, if students feel like they are better at, handling a camera, right? And they want to improve their writing skills, so they might work more as screenwriters and let other people try handling the camera or looking at lighting. So in that sense, they kind of improve their skills. learn more about other skills. And then another thing I like to do is I like to invite a lot of my colleagues from the industry to come in and do master classes, engage with students, talk a little bit about how they got started. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's like a young creative who's trying to find their way in the industry, right? So I think a lot of those conversations and engagement with people from the actual industry really helps in shaping students into what they want to do with regards to their creative careers.
And Dr. Maryam, would you also like to say something on this as well?
Yeah, so I think that overall, one of the things that distinguishes our program is that we really closely mentor our students also. So I think if you come to our wing, what you'll see is a lot of open office doors and, students just hanging out with faculty. I mean, shayad kahiyon ko dant bhi pit rahi ho, but, a lot of them are just kind of working on, getting feedback for their work. They're bouncing ideas off their professors. And there's, literally that's all I see all the time. Sometimes I get a little bit annoyed. I'm like, why are there so many kids here all the time? But it's great, yeah.
This does bring me to my next question. What are the different types of guidance, the opportunities that are available for our students?
I think this is a great moment to be a CLCA major because the world is changing so rapidly, and that I think so many of the jobs are now in social media, in film, in advertising, and many of them involve using a camera, editing material from a camera, but I think they also involve strong and creative writing. That's something that, none of this can exist without. So we offer a lot of that. Some of our students also, of course, end up going into graduate programs in comparative literature, graduate programs in creative writing. Those students who are obviously more textually oriented. But I think for the vast majority, even if they are textually oriented and they're like, okay, I don't want to study just now, I don't want to go back to school just now, they're really poised to enter a number of industries. So new journalism, obviously, as well, is a great one. Now, we see the face of journalism changing. I think, obviously, Tabish has talked about students going into the film industry from LUMS. The other thing I would say is that a lot of professors actually really help students get jobs. So we will use personal connections. We will say, oh, this kid is great. Why don't you talk to, so-and-so? And I think that's one of the things our program does really well.
Well, LUMS does have a 95% placement rate after graduation, and this does bring us to our next and final section of the podcast, which is called Career Opportunities. Mr. Tabish, can you tell us more about the career opportunities available for graduates of this program and maybe even academic opportunities later down the line?
Sure. So I've been part of the media industry, filmmaking industry for about 11 years. And a lot of my students right before they graduate, they're extremely bright, they're extremely hardworking. It only makes sense for me to connect them with a lot of my colleagues in the creative industry. So a couple of my students are working with SOC Films, Shabina Bek Chanoy Films, and there's a few others that have applied for graduate programs. So yeah, in that sense, the future is very, very bright. And I'm really looking forward to connecting more students with the filmmaking industry, because the independent filmmaking industry in Pakistan is growing every year, especially with regards to, workshops and film festivals abroad. So yeah, since I've been here, I've seen more and more students kind of going more towards all of these different industries. So that's really, really great to see.
And Dr. Maryam, what about further academic opportunities for these students?
There's a lot of great opportunities now. Obviously, the old stuff is still there, Fulbright, scholarship, Shifning, all of that is still there. But, our best students have gone on to fully funded graduate programs in the United States, no strings attached. They get money to go to school as opposed to somebody giving money for them to go to school. So I think our first graduate actually is pursuing a PhD at the University of Washington in Seattle. She has a fully funded, stipended position there. Students who minored before the major was made, one of them is at Northwestern University in Chicago, also studying comparative literature. That opportunity remains, and I think that the way we train students actually really sets them apart for these kinds of programs.
So there's a word called scope in Pakistan. Basically, our parents have told us that these subjects have scope and these subjects don't have scope.
Look, the fact that you graduate from LUMS basically, so I'll give you, when I was an undergraduate, I went to a top school in the United States. And one of the things I learned back then was you could be any major. People want a hard worker. That's it.
Yeah,
so people want somebody who can put in 12 to 14 hours of work a day. I could do that. At one point in my life, I could do that. And I think that LUMS also trains you much in the same way that, that you're trained to do that. But I think the edge that LUMS gives you that I don't think my undergraduate institution gave was that it teaches you to work with and be with all kinds of people from Pakistan. So it gets you, even though, we are a bubble, all of that is true, but it still gets you out of your particular bubble, be it whatever type of bubble it is. But it gets you out of your comfort zone. You meet people who are not like you. You learn to work with those people. And that's what the real world is all about. Yeah. So our program, of course, again, I think our program is also a melting pot of all kinds of people. And I think especially, in fact, all of our courses now encourage collaboration, encourage workshopping. So you can no longer be like, oh my God, I'm just hiding in my corner doing my thing, and then come out of LUMS and say, I don't even know how to work with, the guy in the cubicle next to me. But I think that's one of the advantages that LUMS has that is very rare in Pakistan, abroad. And I think that's, and the scope of the program, obviously, I think Tabish and I have talked about it. We are, we sound quirky, but we're actually the most mainstream major now, probably, that'll just put you right in the industry and right in a job that you can earn from and that you'll probably enjoy also, actually. We keep forgetting about that part.
Well, do you have some advice for those students who want to pursue comparative literature and creative arts, but at the same time, they're a little bit hesitant to join this program?
Listen, I would say please join the program because, you could be many things, right? You could be an oddball who likes to draw in a corner, but your A-level art teacher never thought you were good, so you never ended up taking art. We have all those people. We have people like you, writing graphic novels, illustrating books. If you are somebody who loves film, obviously this program, you already know it's for you. But if you're also somebody who's really invested in literature and not just English, but Urdu or Punjabi is artistic, you sing, you have a way of expressing yourself that's different from, not just different, that's which you want to use as part of your life. You don't want to stop singing, you don't want to stop doodling, you want to keep these things in your life. This is the program for you. And again, I will say this again, you will get a job after graduation because you will have skills that are now indispensable in the way that the world, it's a very visual world that we live in now. So actually we will give you the skills with which to really, move forward in your life as well. Yeah.
That was very, very well summed up. I would just add that if you are creatively inclined and like working hard, this program will give you endless amounts of benefits to excel in whatever field you want to excel in. And just to kind of figure out what that is, what direction you want, coming here would really help with that.
And if you would like to be a part of this program, all you need to do is create an application for LUMS, and then you need to move on towards submitting your application. For the deadline dates, let me just tell you, the 4th of February is the deadline to submit your application for LUMS. The 6th of February is the date to submit all of supporting documents for LUMS. The tentative date for the LCAT exam is the 23rd of February. Moving on towards the final date to submit the SAT score, that is the 8th of March. Your decisions will be taken between April till July, and then moving on, your classes will commence from September 2025. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for viewing. Allah Hafiz.